afternoon. It is 1:31, June 15th. We're calling to order the CRTPA Board Meeting and Regional Mobility Plan Amendment public hearing. Mr. Slay, kick us off. All right, we'll start off with the roll call.
Commissioner Barfield? Here. Commissioner Merritt?
Here.
Commissioner Villalobos?
Here.
Commissioner Dozier? Here. Commissioner Maddox? Commissioner Minor?
Here.
Commissioner Matlow?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner Williams-Cox?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, sounds like we got a quorum. Were there any agenda modifications?
No, sir.
All right, we'll go straight into the public hearing.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, thank you all. Good to see everybody this afternoon. If you recall back in November of last year when we adopted our regional mobility plan, one of the things we left out were the transit project portion of the plan because Star Metro was working on both their transit development plan as well as their comprehensive operations analysis. So the plan at the time was to wait until those were completed and come back and amend the regional mobility plan at that time. But one of the things we realized afterwards, in order to maintain consistency with the TIP that you'll be adopting today, we need to go back and amend the regional mobility plan to add some of those projects in. So what we did was we took the relevant projects from the 2040 plan and moved those, or proposing to amend those into the regional mobility plan, as well as a couple of new projects, including the South City Transit Center. So with that, Mr. Chairman, be happy to take any questions. I will point out the fact that we would be back later this year once those two Star Metro plans are finished and look to do a more extensive amendment to the regional mobility plan.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions, input. Commissioner Williams-Cox?
Just a quick question, might have been just a slip of the tongue, but you said the South City Transit or South Side Transit?
They've changed the names a few times. I think now it's the South City Transit Center. It's the one at Meridian and Orange Avenue.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
South City.
Okay, because,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it had a different name.
South-
I
yeah.
think that's the current name. Last
Because South City is a real place, and it's not that place. That's why I asked, but,
Okay.
okay.
We can double check with Star Metro, but I think that's the official name for it now.
Where is South City?
South City is Orange Avenue Apartments in that area around there. And Meridian and Orange is another block or so away.
Gotcha.
So whatever they say, that's what it is. Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
I think those are the
I
official
just wanted
boundaries.
to be clear.
To date, that is that's my understanding is what the name is right now.
Because there's also South City Foundation. And we, want to make sure that we don't get confused in that, so.
Commissioner Villalobos, did you have a comment?
Not this time. It's going to be item 7.
We will turn to public comments on this item.
Anyone signed? We did not have anyone signed up
We
to
did
speak,
not.
excuse me.
Oh, we don't have any
Yeah.
public speakers on this item? Okay.
Mr. Chair, do you need a motion?
Commissioner Dozier, do we need a motion to approve? Yes.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, and thank you.
Roll call.
This one
Okay.
will be a roll call.
We're gonna take this by roll call vote.
Commissioner Barfield?
Aye.
Commissioner Merritt?
Aye.
Commissioner Villalobos?
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier?
Aye.
Commissioner Minor?
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow?
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams-Cox?
All right.
I think that's everyone.
Hello.
Motion unanimously passes.
Oh, well, that's, yeah, okay.
Okay, motion carries. So we're moving on to, we're closing the public hearing and calling to order the CRTPA board meeting. We'll start on item 3, citizens' comments for unagended speakers.
No, sir, we did not have anyone sign up for this portion. We do have speakers that have signed up for item 7A.
7A. Okay, moving on to consent. Commissioner?
Move consent.
Second.
Got a motion for approval of consent with a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to no items pulled from consent to 6, roll call vote, agenda items, the Transportation Improvement Program.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lex will give us a presentation on this year's Transportation Improvement Program.
Thank you very much. I am going to just go over a few highlights of the Transportation Improvement Program and some general information, as we have some people participating that may not have been at our meetings before and may not be familiar with this document. This is a 5-year funding period document. It's approved annually. They add a new 5th year. We allocate resources for projects, both planning, capital, and operating. There's federal, state, and locally funded transportation projects reflected in the Transportation Improvement Program. It's consistent with the Connections 2045 Regional Mobility Plan, and the TIP and the STIP, the State Transportation Improvement Plan. Those two must be consistent as well. The purpose of the TIP is to develop the 5-year program of the transportation projects and to fulfill the state and federal requirements that transportation projects are consistent with local and regional goals, therefore the Regional Mobility Plan. And finally, it's to demonstrate that the transportation projects are financially feasible, that we have fiscal constraint. And over the next 5 years, you can see the funding that is expended. And of course, it reflects, the effects of the pandemic in the last 2 years with a very light work program, and hopefully we'll see some projects come back in. The bike bed projects that were added this year, excuse me, my fingers aren't working very well. Were the Safe Routes to School projects. There were 2 for Sable Palms and Roberts Elementary Schools. The Transportation Alternative Program in Gadsden County, which was the priority number 1 last year, that is funded for construction. And also the Atlanta Street project for Transportation Alternative in Gadsden is funded. Trail projects that are funded are the Monticello Bike Trail and the Coastal Trail, 2 segments. And the Bloxham Cutoff Trail, there's a design funded for that.
Chairman, do we need to vote on these individually?
I believe this will be a roll call vote at the end. Yep.
All of them at one
Yes,
time?
yep.
We each have an agenda item that says approve.
Well, we're actually, Commissioner, we're on 6A, not 7A yet.
One.
Just has to-
I don't have to.
The bridge projects, every county got a new bridge. In addition to, there's a second bridge over a railroad bridge over in Jefferson County that was also funded for replacement. And then they funded maintenance of bridges within Gadsden and Leon County. Major capacity projects, these are the same major capacity projects we've seen in the priority list in the work program for the past few years. Note that Wilani Boulevard, we've asked FDOT to extend the limits from Fleischman Road to Roberts Road, consistent with the blueprint request that's going before their board today. There's also a landscaping project that will finish up a section in Wakulla County. Transit projects reflect the annual transportation funding from FTA and the state that fund the transportation assistance in Gadsden, Jefferson, Leon, and Wakulla counties. In Leon County, of course, there's both funding for rural and urban transit services, and then the Appalachia Regional Planning Council that provides commuter assistance for all 4 counties. I'm not going to go through each of the resurfacing projects, but I said this previously, and it's evident here. There was an emphasis in the work program with maintaining the existing system, both the state roadways and local roadways. So you see a number of projects funded in all 4 counties that are resurfacing, some are widening, and with every opportunity to add any safety enhancements, FDOT will do such. Finally, we'll move on to the transportation system management and systems management and safety projects. This is the first time this list has been named with this safety addition to it. We changed this project category last year to separate out the ITS and the transportation system management and safety projects. For the purposes of the TIP, though, they come combined. And there are, I'd like to note, 4 safety improvements, both at corridors and intersections within Leon and Wakulla and within Leon and Wakulla County. Thank you. So for the, did I go too far? Should be one. There we go. The public involvement, we held 2 public meetings consistent with our public involvement plan. One was an in-person meeting in Jefferson County, and the other was an in-person and virtual meeting here in City Hall. Both were all advertised in all 4 of the local newspapers. And once the board approves this by roll call vote, that's what we're requesting, and approval of the resolution number 2006-0601, this will be transmitted to the district secretary and then forwarded on to the governor for approval. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Barfield?
Yes, thank you very much. I am always appreciative of any asphalt that's being laid down in Jefferson County. And I'm just going to make note of the Asheville Highway from St. Margaret's Church to Bassett Dairy. Asheville Highway is about 14 miles long, and at the rate that we are going right now, my grandchildren that I don't have are going to be retired by the time we get Asheville Highway completely widened and resurfaced. The same is for Boston Highway. Every time that we get an opportunity at Board of County Commissioners, we submit just these little bitty sections to be widened and resurfaced. We just submitted again on Asheville and another segment on Boston Highway. So for my DOT partner over there, I am going to respectfully request that we combine those 2 requests together, put them all into one big pot, and let's do the whole road. Particularly Asheville Highway. And I know that this is a big ask, and the reason I'm taking this ask right now is because that road is definitely falling apart. If we will all remember that all these roads were state roads. Back when I was a little girl living in Lloyd in 1970, that was back when it was turned over to the counties, and we were told that they were going to be resurfaced pretty regularly. And I know we do the best that we can, but my goodness, we just need a little bit more monies and a stretch for our roads to be widened and resurfaced, particularly these long, long roads, and particularly where our farmers are driving and moving about to feed the whole world. I'm appreciative that that bridge is coming in because our farmers can't go over that bridge. So my formal request is that we put the 2 requests together from one year to next year to the year that we just put in, and perhaps we can do those together. But I really want all of it done, but I know that's just like asking for Christmas at Easter. So that's my request.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner BBCA, followed by Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I am also going to sound like Commissioner Barfield in this request. I, first of all, apologize for conflicts in my schedules, especially with teaching and other things, that I have been unable to physically participate in this process. At this point, I was wondering if we can add one more project for Gaston County, if it's possible, and like Commissioner Barfield said, maybe I'm asking for a Christmas present during Easter. This very road is deplorable. It is very, very bad. Dogtown Road. This road connects Point Milligan Road and Salem Road, and because of that connectivity, big trucks, logging trucks and everything else, and cruising on that road, and they're tearing it up. So if we can, please, commissioners, if we can consider adding this, it's a request, it's a plea, it's a beg. That road is, we have patched. If you drive that road, there's patches of asphalt everywhere, and it's done as frequently as we possibly can. And if we can resurface that road and maybe give it a little widening, Gaston County will be much obliged and appreciative. So that is my request, my Christmas request during Easter.
Thank you. I've made note of both, and we will coordinate with FDOT.
Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Barfield, you just brought something to mind that I don't know if I really understand how segmented your resurfacing projects are on some of those rural roads, but it seems like there could be a case to make that it is more cost-effective for the state to do longer stretches at one time. There's one contract, one mobilization, but also anytime you transition from an old road to a newly resurfaced road, you can get damaged at that section. And it is for agriculture. I mean, this is economic development. So, Greg, I'm just wondering if that's something we can explore in the future, if the state might be willing, or, I mean, Brent, I mean, we could find out from your perspective if those kind of asks and that justification ever help to advance resurfacing projects that are for a longer section. Did I capture
Yes.
what your interest was?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it needs to be widened also because those are significant, and you're exactly right, Commissioner.
So the widening may be a separate question, but related for sure. So I'd love to hear if that's something we could explore in the future.
I think there's only a limited amount of money in scrap, right?
Both these, the two small county programs that are most utilized by our rural counties are the SCRAP and the SCOP program. Relatively speaking, those are not well-funded. We have to equitably distribute those funds throughout the district. That's how we've got into this situation of doing the smaller segments. We would love to be able to do the longer segments. We could consider that if we had some level of partnership from a funding standpoint that would allow us to leverage those dollars. At this time, you know, that it would be a district management question because, again, they have to account for where they spend their funds. And at this point in time, we do try to, you know, spread the wealth as much as possible.
I don't want you to take it for more color.
Thank you, Brian. Greg, I don't know if you had anything to add, but I think this answers, that helps fill out the question. We know the funding levels of scrap.
Yeah, I think
scrap
that's the
it.
biggest issue, is you've got how many counties, Bryant, that you have to stretch that money across in District 3 because it's
Honestly,
based on the population of your county.
Yeah.
I think we have 10 counties eligible for both of those programs.
The other thing, too, and this is the part I was going to mention, is, you know, it is a possibility. I know when the last stimulus package that passed back in 2009, there was a significant amount of money available for non-state road repaving. I know in District 5, we did quite a bit of that. I don't know yet, you know, we don't have any details on the new program. If it does come to fruition, there may be some opportunities there, so that's something we'll need to keep an eye out for if and when that package comes to pass at the federal level.
We could just take that toll road money that was in the Jefferson County system and coming out our way.
I like what you're thinking. Well, I guess I would say, I mean, the funding levels, that does make a lot of sense. And
Right.
as always, this is something we talk about the Planning Council all the time. We are the largest area for these districts, less population, so we get less funding, but we have the most rural, I mean, arguably a lot of rural roads to cover
Right.
with that. So if we could bring this up, I know Commissioner Maddox isn't here today, but maybe this is something the MPOAC, or we could elevate to the district to just talk about how we could address this challenge in the future.
Absolutely.
And it would be more fiscally beneficial for the district, yeah.
I would suggest continue submitting the longer segments and keep making us tell you to submit cut them down. So,
Well, should I submit the whole road or just continue just?
no, no, do not submit the whole road.
Okay.
Motion to adopt the resolution.
Second, with my changes.
We have a motion on the table in a second. We'll have a few questions before we proceed. Can you go back to the item for Wilani Boulevard and the connection to Roberts Avenue and what the request on that was?
So originally, and the way it's listed in the work program, is the limits of this project were to, I believe, Shamrock, not Centerville. So Blueprint has approached FDOT, and I believe they're requesting the Blueprint Board to approve it today, to extend those limits to Roberts Road. They asked us to reflect that in our priorities and on the tip, and I believe they've approached FDOT for an amendment to the agreement, for the funding agreement, because there was TRIP funds, Transportation Regional Incentive Program funds, that FDOT provided for that roadway construction.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, well, just to clarify, I believe that was for the design, not the construction.
Okay, thank you, you're right.
My only concern with that, I don't want to get ahead of Blueprint that we'll be considering this item later today. I know a final PD&E draft hasn't been accepted, and there hasn't been a final road alignment, and we have lots of comments that we've been receiving from citizens that want to come and speak at that meeting on that specific route. So I'm very concerned that they may feel like we made a decision here in advance of Blueprint, setting up a future decision. And so I think that may be something we need to look at to be an amendment in the future if that's the route that Blueprint chooses to go. Commissioner Dozier?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was anticipating you might make a amendment to the motion there. So if you just want to consider this in the future, depending on what happens at Blueprint, I'm fine. It seems like regardless of what way we go with Blueprint, there's been a substantial amendment to Blueprint, our intergovernmental agency, that has extended Wilani Boulevard to Roberts. So whether it's done immediately and approved tonight or submitted at a future date, it would still need to be in the list. It would still need to match that substantial amendment at Blueprint. Am I saying that correctly, Suzanne?
Yes, and again, we can approve it for today up to Shamrock, because that, again, that's been the request for Blueprint to have that consistency shown in the PPLs. That's not a problem, because that's simply a request list. These are our priorities. In the tip, they anticipate that this change would be reflected because the agreement would also be reflected, but that can be, we can change that at a later time.
So
So you-
we'll move forward as is and then change it if and when needed.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Well, can I offer a little bit of a different suggestion on this?
Sure.
Because that was one of the requests I recall is actually DOT, and I'd ask Alderman Calder to correct me if I go wrong here. DOT had actually asked for us to change the limits to reflect what the contract is. So I would offer up maybe just with the caveat that the final limits would be consistent with what's approved or not approved at the Blueprint IA today. That way we wouldn't have to come back for official action
Okay.
at a later date, because we won't meet again until September. And if the project goes through this evening, I'm assuming that they'll go ahead and move forward with the design, so we'd have an issue with that piece. But that would be my suggestion is approve it contingent on the final action of the IA.
I'll amend my motion to reflect that.
I'll amend mine.
All right. Any further discussion on this item? We'll go to a roll call vote.
All right. Commissioner Barfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Merritt,
Aye.
Commissioner Villa-BCA,
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Minor,
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Aye.
The motion unanimously passes.
Thank
Okay.
you. And thank you, Greg, for clarifying that it was the DOT that reached out.
So we are moving on to 7, CRTP action, project priority list. We have a few public speakers.
Yes, we have one line. What I would suggest is we go through with the presentation first?
Okay. We'll start with the presentation for item 1, Regional Mobility Plan, roadway project priority list.
I mean, just let-
Thank you.
We're
So
gonna vote on
again,
these individually?
That's actually up to you all. You can do it as one, or.
We'll take 'em
however you want to do
individually.
it.
thank you. Again, I would go back to that we adopt this as approved annually. You see the relationship there of the regional mobility plan. It reflects in the project priority list, which are then feed into the transportation improvement program, which you just approved. They're developed for all modes of transportation. They consider the long-term needs identified in the RMP, and project priorities for the entire region, and it identifies as both projects and phases that are not fully funded. When funding becomes available, they're moved into the FDOT 5-year work program, which is our transportation improvement program. Projects are identified through a number of ways. Of course, it's the regional mobility plan, but that information that goes into the regional mobility plan comes from the CRTPA's congestion management process plan, Star Metro's transit development plan, the Tallahassee Airport's master plan, or through a competitive project search, which is your transportation alternatives. The project priority lists are by category, and here are the categories that we'll quickly go over. Not going to read each list, I'm just going to go through the highlights and the changes on each of the lists. If you have any questions during, please feel free to stop me and ask. So on the roadway priorities, you'll see that number 5, the limits for Orange Avenue, it has been extended from Spring Hill Avenue, it's moved west, so that now the new limit will now be North Lake Bradford Road to Monroe Street. So the design will be funded for that segment. That was something that the CRTPA and Blueprint and the Planning Department all asked that we look at completing that segment from North Lake Bradford to Monroe Street. And FDOT was responsive and changed the limits on that one segment of that project. And also, again, consistent with what we just talked about on Wilani, Blueprint asked that we extend the limits for the Wilani project to reflect North Roberts Road, and that's priority number 14 on the list. Here is the map of the projects. And so for the bike ped projects, I'm sorry, quick.
Hold on one
I'm sorry.
second. A few of these have public comments and speakers that I want to go through. So for those items, I think it's worthy of taking those individually.
Okay.
If it's the board's desire to take the ones that don't have public input all at once, I would entertain that. But,
I got a question about the roadway before we moved on.
okay, yeah, well, let's start here at 1, and we'll do the first item, and we'll just go one by one then. Commissioner Merritt.
On Crawfordville Highway, Greg, you and I talked about this. We had, on the long-term plan, we had split Crawfordville Highway up into 2 sections in order to try to get it funded more easily. Suzanne, can you back up? Number 3. And Greg, I'd just like you to check on that if you would.
Yes, sir, we did, and Suzanne, Commissioner and I were talking before.
We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. We had split this out in the regional mobility plan, so what we can do is go back and look and see how we split the limits we talked about, and probably do something similar to what we did with Project 5.
We did that because the ask was so big that after talking to DOT, it made more sense to split it and catch the intersection at McDonald's, at least improve that.
Before we go forward, Mr. Sims, on the agenda item, you've listed mobility, Star Metro. Are you just wanting to speak on the Star Metro item or other mobility? Okay, we'll call you when we get to that. Further, well, let's take the roadway project priority list first. Any other comments or discussion on that item? Okay.
Is that what you want?
Sure. I'm going to ask, I wanted to ask a question on this, Mr. Slay. When we look at the 15 priority projects, as far as how much funding becomes available in the timeframe to get through this list, what does it look like to get through 15 projects?
Slim.
That's probably that's a good description. I mean, realistically, to get through all 15, we are probably looking at 25 years or better.
25 years, okay.
Just because, of the cost of some of these projects. I would imagine Orange Avenue alone is probably going to be well over $100 million. Yeah, we're probably talking a good 20, 25 years for the project.
Okay.
Crawford Highway.
And so when we look at priorities ranked 14, 15, like a Walani I-10 interchange, is that expected to, right now it's the lowest priority? I mean, would it be safe to assume based on this priority list, that's 20 years out, or is it
Yes,
going
sir.
to skip over Orange Avenue and Third Street?
Yeah, and I mean, if you recall, I think the discussion, particularly on 14 and 15, is, I think it's always been more so that those would be blueprint projects, so to speak. We put them on these lists, similar to what we did with the TRIP funding that we spoke of earlier, more of an opportunity if funds perhaps become available under some federal program or state program, that we've at least identified them as priorities. They're on the lower half of our priority list. But again, there are certain instances where you may have opportunities to obtain some other source of funding. But in terms of the CRTPA's priorities, you know, they are at the bottom of our list. And if we follow the normal state process, yeah, we're at least 20, 25 years out.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams-Cox?
Greg, would that still be the case if we're able to get the infrastructure bill passed from the feds?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so. Both of these projects, especially the interchange, still has an extensive process to go through. There's about 3 or 4 steps before it will be ready. You still have to go through right-of-way acquisition and things like that. I think my understanding to this point, and a lot of this is still speculation by a lot of folks, because we don't have any details on what the federal bill is going to look like, but it's more set up over a 3 to 5 year period. And it would be extremely difficult, especially to get an interchange developed and built in that amount.
Well, I wasn't speaking specifically to that, but I mean to the list of priorities. Right now, their lifespan or the timeline for them are based on available funding, potential funding that we're aware of. But if we are able to get infrastructure funding, that could speed up some of the projects. Is my question. Could that?
Yes, ma'am, most definitely,
Okay.
depending on what the parameters of that new money are. You remember last time, they were looking for shovel-ready projects. Those were projects that had gone through design and ready to go to construction. We've only got a couple of candidates on this list that would meet that particular criteria if it comes into play again. That would be Woodville Highway and the last portion of Capitol Circle from Spring Hill to Crawfordville. But I do think, yes, ma'am, it would expedite some of these projects, but at this point, I can't give you a definite answer on exactly how it.
What would it take to get more shovel-ready?
Most of these projects would have to get through design. Some of them still have to go through environmental studies. Orange Avenue they're wrapping up the one for that one. Design is funded next fiscal year. There's the potential, possibly, if we have a project, though nothing's jumping up here at me that doesn't require right-of-way, that would be a design build candidate, but I think most all of these probably require a substantial amount of right-of-way. So it would really depend on the parameters they put on that new funding.
Okay. I asked that because looking at this list, and you know, we talk about Orange Avenue every time we come together, and I was through there just the other day and held my breath because there was police and ambulance there. I was hoping that nothing had occurred that we talk about every time. I don't want it to get to where something catastrophic happens there that then speeds us up the list, because we need to do something in a hurry because there may have been a loss of life. So that's why I'm asking, and you've answered the question, what kind of things we need to do. And I just want to give you my reasoning. What do we need to do to get more shovel-ready? And I don't want it to be a body count that gets us there. So that's why I'm asking. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Do we have a motion to adopt the roadway?
Second.
We got a motion on the table and a second to adopt the roadway project priority list. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll go to the regional mobility, bicycle, and pedestrian project priority list. We'll do the presentation, and then we'll go to a public comment.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to just highlight some of the changes on this list. The first is priority number 5 added to the list is the North Monroe Street sidewalks from John Knox to Lake Shore Drive. This is funded for design in current year. And so we are looking for construction funding for that. It would be a sidewalk on the west side of the road. And then also for South Monroe Street, we're looking for sidewalks for reconstruction. So those two projects have been added to the list this year. If there's any questions on that, here they are mapped. And with that,
Great.
request approval of the bike ped list. I do want to note that you received public comment yesterday. We sent out late yesterday afternoon on the Thomasville Road multi-use path. We received some emails in support of that, and they were forwarded to you. And that's the only public comment that we've received, any written comment on the PPLs. Thank you.
Move option 1. I think we have a few public speakers on this item. We'll start, I think, online. We have Ms. Jen Bennett joining us.
And I also do have a question, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
So I also do have a question before
Sure.
we move forward, Mr. Chair.
Well, we need to entertain our public speakers before we get into.
I understand that. I was just letting you know, so you don't overlook the fact that.
Oh, sure, I gotcha. Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll come to you first. Ms. Bennett? I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Bennett, try now.
We still can't hear you.
Mark, is there anything you can do on this end?
Ms. Bennett, we have a few public speakers in person. We'll take them and let them try to diagnose the tech issues so we can get your comment as well. So we'll start in-person speakers. We have Larry Gonzalez. You have 3 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Larry Gonzalez, and I live at 825 Greenbrier Lane. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Thomasville Trace Homeowners Association, of which I am currently the president. We're a neighborhood that's located on the east side of Thomasville Road, directly across from South Ride at 2101 Thomasville Road. Our association is in favor of sidewalks and bike paths. We are opposed to the creation of a new multi-use path on the segment of Thomasville Road from Benton Road to Metropolitan Boulevard. We've only learned about this proposal recently. I understand there have been legal notices. As a lawyer for many years, I can tell you the best way to ensure people don't know about something is to put it in a legal notice. I mean, who reads them? But it would have been nice to get a letter like we got recently from the city commission when they decided to close Benton Road to do repairs. Everyone in our neighborhood received a notice about that, and I can assure you that we would have responded earlier and gotten involved in this issue earlier had we been informed directly. Our objection is based primarily upon the fact that there are 2 bike paths and 2 sidewalks on most of this segment of Thomasville Road. Previous public officials had the foresight to put those on Thomasville Road many years ago when that road was widened, and they serve the purpose that I think the multi-use path would serve. And on the other hand, if the multi-use path, as I understand it, its proposal, were to go through, it would require cutting down a lot of stately, beautiful shade-producing oak trees and cutting into the entrance areas of neighborhoods such as Thomasville Trace, tearing down walls and other decorative shrubbery and fixtures. Our residents would not be opposed to a multi-use path being constructed alongside the drainage canal that runs down the side of Winthrop Park and crosses over Benton Road and goes behind not only our neighborhood, but several properties along Thomasville Road all the way up to Armistead. Between those properties and Benton Hills, the Benton Hills neighborhood. While we're not totally convinced of the need for that, it would certainly be preferable to having to tear down trees and interfere with the current aesthetics of neighborhoods that have been located on Thomasville Road for quite a while.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to check in with Ms. Bennett to see if we have sound. Try speaking again. Okay. We are going to go to the next in-person speaker and give them a few more minutes to try to work through this. So Hans Von Toll.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Hans van Tol, 1503 Old Fort Drive. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this issue, which is, I think, normally kind of a procedural vote because most of the projects have been approved previously. And in particular, of course, in this case, the bike bed master plan, I really appreciate you having done that recently and having the project included in this PPL for funding to the state. And in particular, I'm pleased to see Thomasville Road. Thomasville Road has been kind of, for cyclists, kind of an impossible road because it's just not safe for cyclists. And there are no really good alternatives because the neighborhoods that are bordering Thomasville roads are not interconnecting. So for cyclists, you have to find a long way around to move this. And there are several commuters from Killarn that would like to commute by bicycle but cannot because of safety concerns. I consider myself an experienced cyclist and pretty fearless, but and I do use the bike lanes every now and then if I go in that direction along Thomasville Road that start north of Waverly. But I would not do it on a daily basis just because there are so many, the traffic volume is extremely high, of course. There's many drivers that drive in the bike lane partly or are following the cars in front of them too closely that limits their sight. And they don't give the cyclist in the bike lane the required 3 feet distance. So I tend to avoid Old Thomasville Road south of Waverly because out there are no bicycle facilities like at Greenbrier Lane. So for cyclists, this would be really a very good amenity. On the other hand, it seems also for the neighborhoods that are directly bordering Thomasville Road and that use Thomasville Road kind of as a necessity to get anywhere because it's the only exit out of the neighborhood. A bike trail typically increases property prices, and it also gives them an alternative to using a motorized vehicle to get out of the neighborhood. They could use a bike or skates, or their kids could go to the park more safely. So with that, I would like to thank you and drive and ride safely.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. Any luck on the phone participation? Okay. Commissioners, let's do this. 3, 4, and 5 don't have public comment. Let's move 2 down while they work on getting her connected. I don't want to move to a vote absent public comment. That's tempting. So if we can go to the presentation for. Got it?
I think we're try this the old-fashioned way. I'm just going to put my phone up to the microphone and have you do it that way. So you got to love technology. Let's try this and see. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
just state your name and address for the record.
I feel connected now to every teacher the entire year working through their remote technology. Thank you for letting me speak to you. I know that I have spoken before, and I'm just reiterating that we have some concerns about the Thomasville Road multi-use path. Basically, there are two. One is very selfish, and that is that Rose Hollow has been asked and asked and asked and asked to sacrifice our comfortable egress from our development. And there are a lot of us. There are 61 homes in here. And we are concerned about the safety. So that's the selfish issue. The other issue is making sure as good stewards that these paths are actually really going to be used. And I'd love to see some data from places that have put them in place. I have heard from folks who live in Gainesville, but that's fairly anecdotal. I mean, there's nothing that I can look at that tells me where are these paths, what's the usage rate, are there counters, are they really being used to the extent that justifies the expenditure when we have so many other things that need to be in place, or would perhaps a buffered bike lane be a better option? So those are my concerns, and we appreciate, we definitely feel that we have been heard, that we're being heard. We just want to know that it matters. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. Bennett, can you put your, state your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Jan Bennett. I live at 3135 Haddam Court in Rose Hollow in Tallahassee.
Great, thank you, and thank you for participating today. Okay, commissioners, we're on item 2, the bicycle and pedestrian project priority list.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second.
Chair, this is
Commissioner
the
Vivise?
reason reason why I said it earlier, because I know it was going to be before I make my request. My question would be, I don't know if this list here is a list that, I know it's a request for future funding, but there is a bike trail that we have talked about before, and again, my apologies. The Leon to Havana bike trail, is that on a list that has already been funded trail project, or it is something that we are still looking at funding, because I do not see it on this list? That's my question.
Director Tsai?
Greg,
Commissioner Vivise, if you don't mind, if you recall, last time we talked, we actually we'll start a feasibility study on what we're calling the Iron Bridge Road Trail to that connection from, I believe it's Meridian over to Havana. We'll start a feasibility study on that more than likely after the 1st of July, and then probably look to incorporate whatever project we're able to develop out of that study would go on this list next year.
Thank you, Mr. Director, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those of us from Leon County and the City of Tallahassee, we heard some comments about the Thomasville Road Bike Trail at our comp plan joint meeting last week. And there seems like there was a little bit of confusion about one comment I made at that meeting. It came up in one email, and Greg, when we were in briefing, we talked about the next steps in this list. So the conversation we had at that meeting was that this list was comprised kind of holistically, looking at the bike ped connections throughout our community, throughout our region, I should say that. And when any individual project moves forward, there is a specific planning process that goes along with a lot of public engagement. And within that, that is the time when we would see firsthand if there were any trees impacted, or safety, or other mitigations, or other alternatives. you'd mentioned, sir, last week, the Benton Road and the drainage ditch that the city is converting. So am I correct, Greg, that that is the time when we would look at whether or not there was substantial impact to the canopy, other issues like that, and be able to reflect on that with public engagement?
Yes, ma'am. We would, as far as the feasibility study goes, we have another round of public involvement. We have basically wrapped up the first phase. We will take that input, the data that we've gathered related to the information that we got from the city's urban forester, related to the trees, right-of-way, things like that, develop what we would term the recommended route, and then take that back out into the public process, similar to what we did this time, and then ultimately bring that back to you all, I'm guessing probably your November meeting for review. And if it is approved, then we would move into the design phase, and that's where we would get into the specifics of the crossings at driveways, actual final alignments as it relates to what's there with the available right-of-way that we have.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that we understood the schedule for anyone in the neighborhoods that are watching this. I thought you had said it was going to come back to us prior to November, but that was probably part of, I may have misunderstood that. So we don't see it again to hear directly from the public until November, but you all are going to have a lot of public engagement
Right,
and other steps before
Yes,
that.
ma'am. We would
Okay.
do the second phase of the public engagement, I'm guessing probably August and September. We would do a presentation to you all at your retreat in October, which is generally what we do for projects like this, and then come back with the final product for approval in November.
I just wanted to acknowledge that, Mr. Chair, because we have gotten a lot of emails about this, and I think that the next steps in this process are really the important. Nothing has been decided yet to move forward. I have heard from a tremendous amount of people, and I will be honest and say I live with an avid biker who wants to use Thomasville Road, and it does make him nervous. The comments that were made resonate, but the trees and others issues about safety are important too. So I look forward to having that discussion and hearing the specifics about the public engagement once we get through the fall. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. Commissioner Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up to what Commissioner Dozier has mentioned, and that is the public participation, public engagement. Greg, what will that look like? You know, we've heard speakers say this morning that they only got notice in the legal section of the newspaper, which nobody reads. But it was different for the Benton Road reconstruction, and everybody got notices. So how will the public be contacted with to ensure that they are or have an opportunity to give that input?
And Commissioner Richards, I'm not sure. I think there may be some confusion as to how the comp plan hearing was advertised. We don't advertise our hearings or any of our meetings in the legal section for that very reason. Number one, we're not required to, but more importantly, they're just not effective. In the summary that I sent out to you all last week, that's probably a pretty good overview. You know, we would directly contact the homeowners associations again, and I think we've got a couple to add to that list. We initially targeted the ones that abutted Thomasville Road. We sent out somewhere on the order of about 300 to 500 postcards. We've only had a couple of those returned, but of course that's always kind of a gamble as to whether or not folks actually look at it or not.
Right.
Of course, we have our project website, but I think the most effective tool we have is the outreach to the homeowners associations.
Okay.
Again, and I think we've added a few more to that list, so we'll gladly reach out to them when it's time for that second round.
Okay. And just to follow up to that, do you all partner at all with our neighborhood affairs?
Yes, sir. That's the first place we stop.
Okay.
That's where we get our contacts.
Okay.
Especially as it relates to the homeowners association.
Okay. All right.
That is our first stop.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Greg, thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg, also, there are places where you can subscribe to receive notifications electronically. Is CRTPA notifications a part of that? I don't know where. I know with the city and the county, you can select to receive notifications on various subjects. So if there is a place for that to occur, I would recommend that as well, so that individuals could sign up to receive those notifications to their phone or to their email when these things are occurring. And also, I'm sure you use social media and all that, all of those regular places, but the new, the television or, during news time and what have you. Just, we're understanding that a lot of information is coming at people a lot of different ways, and we're just trying to figure out what works best, because there's still going to be some who may not get it, but hopefully neighbors will share the information as well. So the old-fashioned way, as you said, we might want to do a phone chain of folks who live in those neighborhoods, because what we found recently is that information was going to the neighborhood association, but the neighborhood association, it was defunct. And so people didn't get the information. So we have just got to keep trying to reach out as much as we can, however we can, to folks. Put it up at Publix or wherever, where people are going in, so that folks can get the information, because we do want public engagement.
You use a flashing sign and we'll color. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And we do, once folks learn of the project, they're able to come to our website and sign up for project-specific. We don't have, an overall app like the city or the county where you just sign up for periodic updates. And we've got a lot of folks that have commented on this, so we take those as we receive them, and we put those folks on our mailing list, so when that second round, automatically they're updated.
Very
But
good.
again, I go back to the homeowners associations. That's probably our biggest asset, but we've had some issues with this project. The information's not quite up to date. I think you all saw that in the response to Rose Hollow last week. But no, we're always striving to make as much public contact as we can, but in this day and age, it's difficult. Like I said, we sent out, I was around, Jack, 500 postcards on this one. Like I said, only one or two came back. So they're getting out, but again, we all get so much junk mail, you don't know if folks are actually looking at them or not.
I tell you, probably one of the best carriers are children. They'll take it home.
True. And we did actually, for this one, we used a postcard, so we were thinking maybe it's smaller. It might catch somebody's eye because it's just different than a huge flyer that we all get. No, we're constantly trying to improve that process, but it is, as you all know, it's a challenge to get folks involved.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Lex?
Thank you. I didn't actually turn my card to say this, but we did participate in Springtime Tallahassee in presenting information on project-specific activities, as well as informing people about our safety initiatives and our priorities. So we are looking to get back into the community on a regular basis, and I look forward to rotating to the rural counties and participating in some of your activities as well. I actually just wanted to confirm with Dr. V, did you ask about the Tallahassee to Havana Trail and whether it is on this list?
Yes, I think that was my question. Yes, or if not, was it, or is it already on a list that has already been approved? And I think Greg answered that for me, except you have another more encouraging response.
If it's the Iron Bridge Road Trail is one that has been added this year to the regional trail list, and it's noted in the staff report that we're going to approach Sun Trails to see if they will consider adjusting the regional map to show the connection between, and the regional trails are next, so I can get into it, but I just wanted to let you know that we debated internally whether to put it on the list or not, and we determined that it would be a regional connection, so it's on the next list.
Okay, good. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And on the bicycle pedestrian project priority list, I know a lot of people feel like they're just finding out about it, but it really is in the early stages of feasibility. So we have not even seen a route, which side of the road, anything like that. Will come back to our board before. We're not voting on funding or building the trail today. We're just going forward the next step so they can do that community engagement. We also heard lots of concerns from Rose Hollow, and I think some of those concerns we can take to the city as concerned to, traffic concerns during Elf Night and ingress and egress into their neighborhood that can maybe be addressed as a part of this and also separately. So with that, Are there any further comments on this? Commissioner Williams-Cox?
I would just encourage them to stay engaged with the process, even though it's at the beginning. This is the best place to be at the beginning, and stay with it throughout to make sure that voices are heard.
Do we have a motion to adopt?
So move.
Second.
Oh, we already had a motion.
Oh, we did, that's right. There was a motion in the beginning. So all those in favor of adoption, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will take 3, 4, and 5 don't have public speakers, so we can take them all together unless there's
Move
objection.
acceptance.
Second.
Would anyone like to see a presentation? All right.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Dr. V had a question?
On the regional trails, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Nice try, Jerry.
if I can answer your question for you.
Commissioner Maddox?
When you asked if anybody wanted to see a presentation, Commissioner Dozier would like to see a presentation. There's never a time that she's going to pass up, because, I
Okay.
mean, but she's always made,
Commissioner Maddox?
she's always made the comment, and I agree with this. It's
I'm
more
sorry.
me, it's
Well,
more me.
All right, let's
It's
keep order
good
here.
to at least introduce them so the public knows exactly what we're voting on. I agree with you on that part.
Okay,
Thank you,
let's-
sir.
let's
And
run
that's what I was
through-
going to say. I was not going to say we necessarily need a presentation about the whole thing. I did not want to skip Dr. V. And all jokes aside, yes, the public should know. So thank you, Commissioner
Right,
Maddox.
yeah. See, I chimed in for you.
Let's run through the presentation of 3, 4, and 5 collectively, and then we'll address the regional trails issue.
Somehow now I can't move the presentation, so.
Nick,
I think Commissioner Merritt just sabotaged that.
so you just got here.
That doesn't bode well.
There it is.
No, they're doing something back there. I will hit the highlights of it. Just, see if they can get that back up. The next project list would have been the Regional Trail, PPL. I wanted to note that on this list added as priority number 5 is the Iron Bridge Road Trail. It's also Bainbridge Road in Tallahassee, in Leon County. It would be from Orchard Pond Road to US 27 in Havana. It is shown on a map, but again, that is not a connection. That was just for illustration. We do not know how it would connect and what road it would connect in Havana. I wanted to make that clear. 2 projects were removed from the list because they're fully funded and will be constructed in fiscal year 24 and 25 respectively. And this is the Coastal Trail from St. Mark's Trail to the Lighthouse Road and Capitol Cascades Segment 4 Trail. So we are seeing those off the list for the first time. Here we go. Oops, wrong project. They're still working it. Okay. Moving on then from the regional trail list, it would be the Star Metro project priority list, the transit.
We're going to stop at the first 3 because we have a public speaker on this, Star Metro. So were there any?
Oh, that's what you meant, 1, 2, and 3. Forgive me, I'm
Right.
sorry.
No, you're fine. Are there any questions for 3, 4, and 5?
Here we go.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt 3, 4, and 5. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Commissioner Richardson out of chambers.
I do want to make a comment about the Coastal Trail in Cascades Park. It is pretty amazing, people, to start at Cascades Park and go all the way down that trail to Panacea. It really is beautiful. It is amazing. I haven't ridden it all at one time, but I have ridden all of it. And starting at Cascades is pretty cool. Very cool. I applaud everybody in here that has worked on that trail. That is excellent. Excellent. Very good job. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
The next priority list we'll move into, and I understand, as the chair said, there's a speaker for this, is the transit project priority list. These come from Star Metro and are identified in the transit development plan. On this list, the only change is on priority number 4. Last year, it was operational improvements at CK Steel Plaza. They have identified other funding opportunities for that. It has been removed and replaced with electric bus fleet charging infrastructure. And that's the new priority for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one public speaker on this item, Stanley Sims.
Mr. Chair, I'm Stanley Sims at 1320 Avondale Way. Commissioner Dozier, this will be a very short presentation, and I just want, with this committee and your focus, and I may be wrong, but I see a lot of focus on roads, trails. But what about the mobility of the people that move on those trails and those roads? And the reason why I bring that up, just yesterday I was over in Gaston County. And when I lived in Gaston County as a small person, you lived in Gaston, and if you wanted a good job, you came to Leon. But the main hurdle was always transportation. And so as we come out of this pandemic, and we're trying to get our economy back up on the road, and if you're going to really want to spur the workforce in our rural communities outlined in Tallahassee, this is the, in my opinion, with my minute information of this board, that's where it comes in moving people around. I was over in Gaston and Quincy yesterday, and they said, Stanley, I'll work, but I don't have the money for transportation. Because when you live in Gaston and when you live in Wakulla, and I've once lived in Havana, and that was many years ago, you got to pay somebody to take you to work. Or you got to pay someone to take you to the closest bus in Tallahassee. So when we talk about mobility, is there some mobility where we can have a checkpoint where we can move people in the mornings, pick them up in these outlying areas, bring them to these workforces with all of these jobs we got coming on force? We're going to need this. And so, please don't take my remarks as criticism about roadways. That's not. I'm just asking for some attention on the mobility of people, and if we could balance these limited resources that you have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
I believe the Planning Council, we kind of addressed this issue with what is that program we got, Chris?
We do have the Regional Commuter Assistance Program that works with large employers to try to get people to actually ride together, and they can use an app on their smartphone. And there's other options and opportunities for people who don't have transportation to work together to carpool to help. So COVID has kind of derailed us over the past year in getting the word out, but we are still working, and we're hoping to make some real progress this year in advertising and getting information out to people that can take advantage of that program.
Motion to approve.
Second. Got a motion on the table for approval by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Dozier. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 7, Tallahassee International Airport Project Priority List.
Actually, if we may, number 5 and 6, were they included in the previous approval? Okay, thank you, I wasn't sure. On the transportation, the priority.
One second, just for clarity. I think we have different numberings on board docs in the CRTPA item. So that's why we're off track. So let's take the vote. Okay. Let's do them by name. Let's take the vote on the Star Metro project priority list.
I will make that motion, Mr. Chair, but quickly, earlier when we made the motion for 3 through 5, we had skipped the trails, or Star Metro rather. So can you just remind us for the record what that motion was to make sure we're...
I think what we should do is vote Star Metro and then take the other 3 by name and just reaffirm that vote.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table for the Star Metro project priority list. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So the previous 3, 4, and 5, based on board docs, was the Regional Trails Project Priority List, the CRTPA 23 to 27 Transportation System Management and Safety Project Priority List, and Intelligent Transportation Systems Project Priority List. So those were the three that we would take collectively. So we'll circle back to see if there were any comments on those three.
You want another motion on those?
Yes.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
As listed.
We were just kind of reaffirmed since the numbering was different for different commissioners. All those in favor of the three stated in the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So that would take us to the Tallahassee International Airport Project Priority List, number 7.
On the airport, they provide us the priorities annually to reflect the funding that's available by FTA, and then the matching funds that are available by this City of Tallahassee or Leon County. So with that, I'm requesting approval for
Motion
this
approved.
priority list.
We got a motion on the table by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Minor. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are on 7B, CRTPA safety discussion. We have one public speaker on this item. We'll just go ahead and take that first. Hans von Toll.
You wanted me to speak now. So my name is Hans van Tol, 1503 Old Fort Drive, and I'm concerned about traffic safety and especially bicycle and pedestrian safety. And I think, as you'll see, if Jack is going to present the same numbers as he did at the CMAC the other day, is that the number is rising. So over this period, almost by a factor of 2, if I'm correctly. Bicycle and pedestrian safety is important. These are two-party crashes, in a sense. A lot of the motor vehicle crashes are actually single vehicle crashes. So if you're looking at the number of crashes between two parties, bicyclists and pedestrians really are a big part of that mix. And it's especially important also for cyclists. So what I kind of wanted to say also for cyclists, there are a lot of a reasonable number of fatalities here. We kind of have the average of Florida, and Florida is the worst state in the country with respect to bicycle deaths and pedestrian deaths. And we are kind of on par with the numbers from the state. And I think in the period, the last 10 years, there have been 10 cyclists killed. And sometimes you read these police reports and you see, so who is the guilty party, who is not the guilty party? In many of the cases where a cyclist is killed, the cyclist does not get to tell their side of the story either. So when Dave Baton was killed on Tram Road, when he was riding out with his son in 2011, I think the driver was looking at her child in the back seat and was not looking at the road ahead of her. Steve Rieker was killed at US 90, which is also bike route 90, when he was out for a training ride, a very experienced cyclist. Ms. Larmo, the same year, 2018, was killed on the same Max Trail at the crossing with Oak Ridge Road at the trail crossing there. So there are all these things, and then the report is being written. What is often absent is what is the speed of the cars that are driving. Often alcohol gets measured from the victims, but not often from the drivers. So it's, I just wanted to say these things also a little bit to speak for the people that have been killed in the last many years. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. We'll turn to the staff presentation.
Actually, Jack's going to give us a presentation.
Thank you. And Hans, that's a good lead-in and some good background information. The bicycle and pedestrian safety information is really related to the transportation performance management system that we are being evaluated on an annual basis, and provided that information from the Department of Transportation. Greg Burke, who had presented this in February, the board approved that. And what we're looking for, I think from the statewide, is 0 deaths, period, across the board, not just for bike and ped, but across the board, period. And there's a lot of MPOs that have adopted that. We took a little bit different approach, and we have a rolling average for ours, a rolling 5-year average for our information. You get into these reports and you get really kind of familiar with all these accidents, and the ones that Hans is talking about, you know, they're not hard to pick out because we have 8 total in the last 10 years in Tallahassee, Leon County, the entire region. So it's very noticeable when we do have a death from a bicyclist, but we do have way more than that. We have pedestrians being killed. We have pedestrians and bicyclists with serious injuries. So this data that we took a look at from the Transportation Performance Management from the department has an average rolling number that rolls up serious injuries and fatalities for bicycle and pedestrians. So when you look at the numbers, it looks really, I'll say this, it looks really high. When you look at the column or the far right number from 2016 to 2020, it's around 42. But when you break that data out individually from a 5-year rolling average, you're looking at somewhere in the 5 to 6 range with bike and pedestrian, or with bike, and even higher with pedestrians because we have way more serious injuries and fatalities for pedestrians. And again, that's rolling up the numbers as well for those two modes of transportation. So what we wanted to do is take a little bit more finer grain detail look at that information, break it down even further by bike, pedestrian, serious injuries and fatalities, to kind of take a look, and maybe we can pinpoint something that's sticking out, something that's that we're not looking at in terms of from the outside there's a crash, but the report has a lot more information that we can detail. And just as a general rule, when you look at these graphs, the influence from Leon County will be very noticeable because of the population and number and the density. You would expect that Leon County would have more from the perspective of numbers of injuries and fatalities from both bicycle and pedestrian. But here is the numbers that were from the bike fatality issue from 2011 to 2020. And again, it is very inconsistent. And really, when you look at the data, we go into some of the issues that contributed to the crash, which was failure of right-of-way and failure to obey traffic signs. There's no real thing that we can point to with the bike fatalities as something that we might be able to take a look at from a perspective of providing safety, because they are kind of scattered. This map shows you where those locations are, and again, we had 4 in the last 5-year period, so that it's very difficult to kind of aggregate or take a look at anything that we could possibly do out there, except for we'll always have better and more information about bicycle and pedestrian safety. We did take a look at time of day and the conditions out there, the average or the ages of the driver and the bicyclist. And again, with just so few data points, it's really kind of hard to kind of look at any kind of contribution that we could make outside of education and better information. For serious injuries on bicyclists, we do have more. And again, you can see the influence of Leon County on the overall chart. And, with Jefferson County, we can say that there was 1 in Gaston County. There was 1 in the last 10-year time period. The issues that were brought up as part of the bicyclists' contributions to the crash were failure to yield right-of-way and wearing dark clothing and having poor lighting or walking on the wrong side, walking wrong or riding on the wrong side of the road. So when you're making a right-hand turn, and you're looking to your left, you're not looking to your right. When people are approaching from the right, that's called approaching from the wrong direction. So you have some fatalities and some directional issues with that. There's again here, there's a few of those in terms of serious injuries, but with pedestrians, again, you have those numbers going even higher. So we also took a look at the contributions of the bicyclist, or the actions that contributed to the crash. And again, failure to yield right-of-way and operating the vehicle in a careless manner are the highest numbers that we're seeing from those perspectives. And here's where they map out. And in general, what we see is a trend. If you look at Monroe Street, and we'll kind of go to a closer view with an inset here, is that for the most part, west of Monroe Street is where we see problems. We see issues along Pensacola Street. We see issues along Tennessee Street. And you'll see this pattern consistently throughout the bike and ped data. Here, we do see an issue in the midday area with the serious injuries. A lot of these are occurring at daylight hours, and the age groups that we're really looking at from the bicyclist age are from 20 to 35, with those drivers who are contributing to the crashes in the 20 to 35 range as well. And again, that points to better education and more information for that traveling public. In terms of pedestrian fatalities, the numbers are higher. Again, you see the influence of Leon County. All of the counties do have some issues with pedestrian fatalities. The difference, when you look at how people use bicycle and pedestrian, the pedestrian will see an opportunity to go across the road, and they will take that opportunity. Bicyclists maybe not be able to get off the sidewalk as quickly, so they're a more timed event sometimes. The crosswalks are issues as well, but in general, the pedestrians, we see more being in the roadway improperly. Visibility is always a bad sign, and we have people trying to make a dash across the road and not being successful. And it's not just 2-lane roads, it's 4-lane roads and 6-lane roads. They just see an opportunity and they go for it, and unfortunately, they don't make it across. And there were some comments, I think, at the committee level with wondering if we ever tried to figure out why. And I'll say, it's when you're incapacitated or you're dead because you tried to make an attempt and didn't make it, there is no reason why. There's just an attempt, and I would hesitate to say, and this is just my guess, that they're probably not going to remember what hit them when they're not able to see what's coming at them. So from that perspective, we don't really have a good amount of information about what the injured or the fatality person saw or heard or did in general. Those things just are not included in the report. They're not available. So we have to kind of take a look and make sure that we're addressing those as best we can with the data that we have. From the perspective of the driver's actions and pedestrian fatalities, acting in a negligent manner, failing to stay in your lane, coming off the road, those are the big issues. And again, we take a look at where these are happening, maybe taking a little bit more detail. Maybe they're happening where there's no sidewalks, where we have dirt paths, or maybe the sidewalk is got an issue in terms of there's an engine or geometric issue that needs to be addressed. Here's where these locations are occurring, and again, there's none of these years that are untouched. And again, these are just 2016 to 2020 numbers. Monroe Street, top to bottom, is an issue. Pensacola Street has one or two. Tennessee Street is a pretty significant issue. And then there's a couple on Crawfordville Road around the Shelfer Road area that are issues as well. And here, if you take a look at the upper left-hand corner of time of day, you kind of see a peak hour chart with highs in the beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day, and in the middle, you kind of have a lunchtime rush. So that's kind of a traditional look at the flow of traffic, and it's the same thing with pedestrians here. And again, the age groups are pretty stable at 20 to 35 being an issue, with the pedestrian age group being a little bit higher in terms of the fatalities in the 45 to 55 range. And lastly, the group that has the most injuries whatsoever are the pedestrian serious injuries, well over 190 of them. And we take a look at, again, the dashing and the darting of those. 37 attempts were made to run across the road and were unsuccessful. In the roadway improperly and failed to yield right-of-way are big issues, and obey traffic signs, and poor lighting is always an issue at times as well. When we're talking about the driver, we're looking at operating in a negligent manner and failure to yield right-of-way. I wish I could say that. And that's significant across the board as well in terms of the driver's side of the ledger. And these are the points of issue that we've got with serious injuries for pedestrians. And again, Monroe Street, Tennessee Street, Pensacola Street has big issues in the downtown area where we're seeing a lot of that activity around the universities as well. In these charts with serious injuries, we're seeing, from 10 o'clock on, and it's just open season. They're just everywhere and all across the board in terms of time. There is a big daylight component, but at the same time, when you add the two dark lighted and not lighted, they're equal to the same amount of injuries as the daylight is. So we've got some issues with lighting somewhere. Pedestrians, in terms of the age groups, again, are in that 20 to 25 with the same driver's age as well. It points to an educational, again, continuing to say that. Alcohol, drugs, and distracted driving. We do have a pretty serious number of alcohol-related crashes. And as a percentage of the overall totals, you can see those here. There was a question about distracted driving, and we do have a number of distracted drivings, but that's not just cell phone related. Could be glare from the sun, could be eating, being inattentive, could be any number of things. There were actually 4 that were domestic disputes where one person got out of the car and the other person hit them. So it's distracted driving all across the board. So when we take a look at this, we just have to keep in mind that it's not just cell phone related, but there are a number that are cell phone related. So when we take all this information, what we want to do is start taking the opportunity to get a little bit more detail, identify some corridors for evaluation, which I don't think would be too hard to pick when we take a look at Monroe Street, Tennessee Street, Pensacola Street, create some analysis through our GPC program and incorporate some of the projects that we're seeing into our congestion management plan, create a safety plan so that we can move these forward and start funding these projects. And one project that is ongoing was the TPD, High Visibility Education and Enforcement Campaign, which ended around mid-May, I believe. And so we're waiting to see what the information is from that report so that we can either start taking a look at those locations that they have information on or move those locations around so that we can start getting information at other locations so they can take a look at those as well through our process. And then if there's any questions.
Thank you, Jack. Any questions? This is just an informational item. Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Greg, is there any data that separates out the scooters? I'm just interested in knowing, I know we hear a lot about in the news, bicycle and car crashes, but have there been any incidents? Does this data separate out data that involves the scooters?
So on all the reports that I reviewed, there was one that had to do with scooters. But keep in mind, we're just dealing with serious injuries and fatalities.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at all the reports in terms of bicycle and pedestrian and scooters, you'll find that there's a lot of them, but they're just not related to injuries.
Okay.
Or they're a minor injury and they're not incapacitated. So the incapacitation is from, an ambulance. When an ambulance is called and you're taken away in an ambulance, those are serious injuries.
Okay.
So I'm sure that they're out there, but that's not what we were looking at.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not a happy presentation, but it is good to understand where we are, what the factors are, so thank you very much. This is helpful. I'm really interested to see what TPD has been working on. That was a very interesting project we discussed in briefing a little bit, and thanks for mentioning it. Just on the lighting issue, for Leon County, we have looked at trying to install lights on some of our rural roads, primarily intersections, but there may be some other areas that we could look to do that. The list is extensive, as you might imagine. But if there's a way to coordinate, any of the data that comes out of this process to say that we actually have a few areas that we might need more lighting, I think it would be really interesting just to communicate that to county staff to see if there's some overlap. I do want to acknowledge, when I mentioned this during briefing, Greg, you rightly said, as you showed, a lot of them are during daylight hours. But just if we have a multifaceted approach to this, there might be some opportunities for lighting in some of the rural areas of Leon County that we didn't have before. So I'm just very curious to see where this goes. Thanks.
And we have been, we did hear from Charles Wu, and so we are coordinating with him to make sure that we've got that when we get down into more detail.
Thank you. That's perfect.
All right, seeing no further comment, we'll move on to 8, Florida Department of Transportation report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The department's got 2 upcoming meetings to make the board aware of. Both are related to ongoing PD&E studies within the region. First one is the Orange Avenue PD&E study. We're starting to wind down on that one. We have the public hearing scheduled for July 29th, and that'll be held from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Family Worship and Praise Center on Lake Bradford Road. I'm giving these notices a little early since the CRTPA won't be meeting again until September. We will send out a notification of this meeting on June 29th to all the elected officials, stakeholders, and citizens along the corridor. But again, that's the Orange Avenue public hearing on Thursday, July 29th. The other one is the US 19 multi-use trail PD&E study. That study has just kicked off. We intend to have the alternatives public meeting on September 16th from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Monticello Opera House. Again, the notification to the elected officials and other stakeholders will be sent out August 19th as a reminder. We do anticipate this being a kickoff and alternatives meeting with a actual public hearing as we close this out in October of this year. With that, that concludes the department's update.
Any questions, Commissioner Richardson?
Brian, I'm back with the same subject again on those crosswalks.
Yes, sir. We
Orange
checked
Avenue.
into that. Actually, CRTPA staff had allocated some SU funding for those. Unfortunately, we were not able to get those into the work program at the end of this fiscal year. I've reached out to both our safety office and our design office to see how we need to expedite getting the design on those done and move forward and getting those in place for you. So we anticipate being able to give you an update at the September meeting. We will have basically wrapped up the initial part of the development of the work program, and so we should be able to get those funds allocated on those projects.
Okay. And I mean, because since we met last, I think it might have been late last week, there was another major accident at that intersection where I told you people try to get over. They're in the right turn lane on Orange Avenue to turn right on Wanish Way, and they try to get over. And there was an accident just the other day where they took out the fence, FAMU DRS, the exit fence from the campus, and the entire Star Metro pickup facility. The car just took it out completely. And my neighbor told me it was one of those same kind of accidents where the car was trying to get over and the other driver wouldn't let him over, and they just went right into.
I'll touch base again with our traffic operations office. We reached out and actually proposed that they put up some of those delineator posts to if you're going to run over them, you can, but it will stop the majority of folks from
Something
trying
like
that.
what we've got behind City Hall now.
That's exactly what we were proposing for them to put out there, but we'll follow up and get you an update.
Okay, and then certainly, the crosswalks, if we can get those, at least get close to getting those done before school starts again at NIMS in particular.
Okay.
Director Slay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Following up on that, we had a meeting with the DOT safety engineer last week or week before and talked about both of those. They're going to try to get the crosswalks done by start of school next year. No promises, but they're trying to do that. Liberty Park is going to take a fair amount of time more because there's no sidewalks there or anything. So you've got to go, in essence, start from scratch. But Mike Lewis, the district safety engineer, had a couple of ideas and proposals on the crossings at NIMS. And again, they're going to try to get them by start of school, but not 100% sure if we can get them by then.
Yeah, and I knew Liberty Park would be a challenge because that's why we can't even put a Star Metro bus stop there, because there is no sidewalk. But people still cross the street because there is a bus stop.
Right.
And they still cross the street to get to the bus stop. They cross the street to get to the little convenience store. Yeah. So, but I knew that one would be more of a challenge than NIMS. But thank you, Greg, for looking into that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner V, followed by Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Richardson comment just trigger some of the concern that I have expressed with this board before and with FDOT, and I hope they take it seriously until we start having body bags to show. But I think prevention, they say, is better than cure. And this has to do with crosswalk. This crosswalk, we are asking for 2 on Pat Thomas Parkway. One is at Walmart to the National Guard crosswalk. That's the only way that people can go from Walmart to the other side of Pat Thomas Parkway. And then the other crosswalk is going to be is at Captain D's crossing to Walgreen. That is not too far from the 90
Just south of
90 and Pat Thomas cross intersection.
In Crawfordville,
Yes, no, this
Crawford.
is in
Crawford Street.
Crawford Street. Yeah, that's what it is. And then the other concern is this is a very, very dangerous intersection, which I have seen and people and citizens have actually seen, although there have not been injuries and deaths yet, but I hope we never get there. This is at the intersection of County Road 161 and State Road 12 at that convenience store gas station that is right there at Point Milligan, where it meets the Havana Highway, which is State Road 12. That's a very, very dangerous intersection. And then Mr. Cunningham also had an accident not much long ago. This is at the State Road 12 and the truck route right by the airport in Quincy, where the truck route connects with State Road 12. Folks don't even care to stop when they're coming from the truck route into State Road 12. And there is a curve that comes on State Road 12 right before they get to the truck route. So they don't even see the vehicle coming, and they just come and hit the other vehicle. So if we can please look at those before we start getting body bags and getting funeral homes to take bodies. Prevention, please, is better than cure. Thank you very much. And thank you, Commissioner Richardson, for joining my memory and my request for those public safety and pedestrian safety concerns.
And I thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to add that part of was confusing and complexing, I think, to some people is that Orange Avenue is split up in 3 different pieces. And the county piece, the crosswalk and the flashing lights right off of the roundabout just appeared overnight, it just seems. And people are not understanding why that it happened there, but it seems to be a delay in happening on other parts of our Orange Avenue. So I find myself explaining that that's the county part.
Yeah.
The state part is where we're having a bit of delay. So I think that we need to take that into consideration when we're looking at that we've got to be able to explain why you can do it here, but you can't do it here. And maybe we shouldn't have to explain that. If you can do it here, we ought to figure out how to do it here as well. Is what I wanted to add, that it was confusing to me as well until I understood when we had to have 3 separate ceremonies to make this a memorial highway for C.K. Steele, and we had to do it in 3 pieces because of the way it's because Betsy, the asphalt is perfect. It's not, I mean, it continues. It's a long road and it continues. No one knows where and how they break off, but they do. And I also wanted to Dr. V, you all know I am from Quincy, and I bet y'all didn't know Quincy had an airport. Don't try to fly into there. You have to have special permission to fly into Quincy. But where he's referring to that Pat Thomas Parkway in Crawford and Highway 9 and Jefferson Street, to me, it is kind of confusing because when I'm trying to make a left-hand turn to go to the continue Crawford Street, there's great demarcation on the road, but the turning lane is further up for turning on the 90, and there is no real turning lane to turn left on the Crawford. So I find myself out there trying to, read what's going on there. So it is confusing. So I'm hoping, and also at Point Milligan, I'm very familiar with that one as well. That little, is the flashing light still there?
No, I had, excuse me, I had flashing light way back on Port Milligan, a caution flashing light for the drivers that are approaching State Road 12. But they ignore that.
I know.
And it's so way back flashing on Point Milligan, because that is the County Road 161. Yeah. But by the time they get to the intersection of State Road 12, where they're making a right turn, they don't even see the vehicle coming from Havana on State Road 12. So it's a very dangerous spot that we need to do something about.
So I just wanted to add witness to that, because it's been a problem for a long time. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. If no further comment, we'll move on to 9, Executive Director's Report.
Just a couple of brief things, Mr. Chairman. We talked a little bit about Thomasville Road. Just to reiterate, like I said, we'll be doing a second round of public involvement of that, probably starting in September or August, and then coming back to you in the October-November timeframe. I mentioned also earlier briefly the federal legislation. You probably saw in the last few days, there's supposedly a compromise has been reached, but again, we haven't seen any details. From what I'm understanding, it's a fairly high-level agreement, so the devil's always in the details, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. I don't know that we would see anything through Congress by our next meeting, but we'll keep you all informed as to what we hear as that goes through. Our audit is running on schedule, hopefully to be finished up by the end of this month when it's due. All the money's accounted for, as far as we can tell. And we've got a draft report on our federal highway certification. There were 2 findings on that, part of which we took care of today with moving in the transit projects into their RMP. Another one dealt with consistency with the Regional Mobility Plan and the TIP. We've actually got some questions on exactly what they meant on that one, but by and large, it was a very good and very clean certification. They will be here, I believe, at your September meeting to give you all a presentation on the results of that. That, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Slay. Item 10, there were 3 information items, future meetings, dates, committees, actions, or CRTPA project updates. Any questions or concerns on this? All right, we're at item 11, items from CRTPA board members. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, there is a North Monroe task force that's being created to identify, among other things, capital improvements along the North Monroe corridor. Just wanted to kind of bring that to everyone's attention. Once this task force concludes its work later this year, there may be an item, a proposal coming to CRTPA for its consideration. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I just want to keep rail on our radar. We talked about it at the last meeting.
Oh, rail.
Yeah, rail, R-A-I-L. Let's get real about rail. Just want to let you know, I'm still listening, I'm still watching, and people are still sending information. I learned that there's a railway between, is it Perry and somewhere in Georgia? There's a,
You sent the video
Yeah.
work they did on that. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am, I did get that.
yeah, okay.
And,
Active Railway?
I can't remember the name of it, but I was
Is
just
it an
surprised.
It's
Yeah.
an active rail. It's not the.
Go to Buckeye?
It's not a passenger, it's
No, it's industrial.
industrial.
Buckeye plant?
No, it's something up in Georgia. They had about a $13 million investment.
I think
I
it's,
bet
Ferry to somewhere
bet
in
it's that.
southwest Georgia.
That's a huge, they're probably going up there to Metcalf, where they're processing
But
those.
Commissioner, just so you know, I reached out after that meeting to Ricky Fitzgerald.
No, there's
He's the
another.
central office rail and transit coordinator. They're actually doing a rail study statewide now and looking at both passenger and freight rail. And he's agreed to come to your your October retreat to give us all a presentation and update on the work that central office is doing as it relates to rail.
excellent, thank you.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Williams-Cox, thank you for bringing that back up. I'm glad to know we got the presentation. Just in the last week, I think I heard some reporting about restoration of rail service between New Orleans and Mobile. That was part of the longer section that was knocked out by Hurricane Katrina. And it was really interesting to hear comments from some of the smaller towns along that rail where they are already seeing businesses move in to strip malls, kind of changing up those businesses in anticipation of some of these stops. So I hope with the Florida rail study, but also that example, it would be really interesting, Greg, if we could hear anything about that example and whether or not Florida is looking to that to see what the economic benefit and the impact is, particularly for those communities along, with stops along that passenger rail system. So they did raise the point about the impact of freight. I mean, that's going to be a longer-term challenge. But I'm glad we'll be bringing it up in October. Thanks.
Any further comments? All right, good work today, everybody. Thank you, staff. We stand adjourned.